what I suggest people to do is take a look at the fundamentals of the real estate deal, and whatever cost segregation has to offer, that's just going to be an additional, cream on top of everything else. Cost segregation isn't going to make a bad deal good. It's going to make a good deal better.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henschel. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hannes Henschel. In today's episode, we have an inspiring guest who is a renowned cost segregation expert, Mark Gross. We will explore his expertise in cost seg studies to increase cash flow and decrease taxes, focusing on the power of cost segregation in commercial real estate. With over a decade of experience, his insights are invaluable. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you're speaking on stages like last week, down in the Carolinas. So definitely someone I want to have a conversation with on the podcast. So thank you for making the time.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So for someone who hasn't quite wrapped their head around, what does cost segregation do for the general investor? Like as an LP, what do I benefit from if my GP goes out and does a cost segregation study?
Sure. Let's first of all talk about what happens if you don't do a cost segregation study.
Yeah.
And that is when you buy a property, what will happen is the CPA will do a straight line depreciation. So you take a look at the acquisition cost. You have to subtract the land value because you can't depreciate the land. And for residential, like multifamily properties, it's going to be a straight line depreciation for 27 and a half years. And for all other property types, that will be a straight line depreciation of 39 years. So what we do is we provide an alternative to that. And what cost segregation does is with our studies, we will identify what are the components within that property that can be depreciated faster. And there's such a thing called bonus depreciation, where you can actually do the lion's share of the depreciation in the first year. Now, that's not going to be all of your structural components within your property, because you're still going to have the bricks and facade and all those other things, which are still going to need to be straight line depreciated. But our study will identify what's the components that can be depreciated faster, and that's what we do. And then the question is, well, how does that benefit me? Well, think about it this way. Let's say you have a net operating income of $100,000 and you pay taxes on that based on whatever your tax rate happens to be. Well, what if our study creates an additional $100,000 of depreciation? Now, depreciation is an expense, but it's a non-cash expense, and it was still net against your income. So rather than paying income on your $100,000, you would pay nothing. And if the study creates an additional amount more than you can utilize in that first year, it can be carried forward indefinitely until it gets used up.
Yeah, so it's a very powerful tool. In terms of bonus depreciation, lately I heard a talk that they're considering not phasing it out. Is that a thing?
Yeah, just within the last week or so, there's been, well, first of all, let's back up as far as, bonus depreciation.
Yeah.
The bonus depreciation for new acquisitions came about at the end of 2017 as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And what it basically indicated is that any componentry with a less than 20-year life could be depreciated 100% in the first year of ownership. And let me repeat that. When you buy a property with bonus depreciation, anything with the 20 or less year life, you can depreciate 100% the first year. So think about it this way. Carpeting will be a 5-year property. Parking lot would be a 15-year. And you're able to depreciate that faster. Now, what you're referring to is that there was a phase out with that. And the last year for 100% was in 2022. And it goes to 80% in 2023 with subsequent reductions of 20% per year until it goes away. However, in the last week or so, there's been a conversation in Washington, D.C. about extending that. And what that would do is make 2023 retroactive to 100% and extend that through 2025. However, we all know it's very political in nature, and I've been asked, when's that going to take effect? Well, we don't know. So all I basically say is stay tuned, see what Washington, D.C. will do.
which could be anything and nothing, it's like, but I guess it's good that it's on the table. I mean,
Yeah,
we've tremendously benefited from it already. Like everybody who's actually making use of bonus depreciation, I think, had an amazing run in the last 6 years. So that would be a great tool to have in the toolbox to make properties and deals work more beneficial. Because right now, you probably know deal flow is significantly down. You're probably also affected from that. So it would enable, in the current interest environment, to maybe pencil out more deals attractively for LPs because they get that bonus depreciation on top.
Yeah, that's possible. You're right. Because of interest rates, that is affecting deal flow. However, some people have the misconception that if bonus depreciation goes away, then cost segregation goes away. And that's not the fact. I mean,
Yep.
We've been doing this for 20 years. We're the largest in the industry, having completed tens of thousands of studies over the years. And that even if bonus depreciation were to go to zero, you can still use cost segregation. And that is like what I indicated previously. If you have carpeting, which is a 5-year property, rather than do that over 27 and a half years or 39 years, you can do it over 5 years, as an example.
But from an incentive perspective, it also, like, let's say we do multifamily value adds, it also incentivizes me to focus on short-term improvements, because I do want to do the improvements that give me, I guess, kind of the most bang for the buck. And also, if I get the cost segregation, I would like to focus on those that benefit me more. Do you think that occasionally can maybe lead to less structural investment in the property?
Possibly. Sometimes people will ask me, what's the best thing I can do to take advantage of cost segregation in buying properties or property types or things of that nature. And even though that's what I do, I think the fundamental should be what's the best real estate deal, regardless of what cost segregation is. You have to buy it right. You need to, are you doing a value add? Are you going to change it from a C to a B class property? What's your exit strategy? There's so many other variables. And what I suggest people to do is take a look at the fundamentals of the real estate deal, and whatever cost segregation has to offer, that's just going to be an additional, cream on top of everything else.
Yeah, I'd say yes. So
definitely. If I could just add to that, is cost segregation isn't going to make a bad deal good. It's going to make a good deal better.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that one. That you just throw a great tagline here. It's not going to make a great deal out of a bad deal. And I think that's also, especially in this market environment, you just have to focus on those fundamentals and then take all the benefits of bonus and depreciation and cost segregation. So what's usually the process for someone who starts working with you? For example, at which point of the acquisition should a GP reach out to you to get a sense of what they can offer their LPs in terms of cost segregation or bonus depreciation?
Sure. It really varies significantly. Sometimes people don't contact me till after they close on the property. I have people right now contacting me that closed on properties in 2022 that are on extension for their taxes, and they want their studies done this summer so they can get it filed. Yeah. We don't recommend that necessarily, but sometimes, especially with syndicators, they want to get the K1s out to their their LPs earlier. Yeah. But sometimes I'll have people contact me on a new construction deal, even before they break ground on it, because they want to see what the estimated numbers are to put into their pro forma. Now, they wouldn't actually move forward with the study until actually they've completed it and it's in service. But it really varies, and sometimes it varies depending upon the time of the year. Like I had some clients that closed on properties in December this past year, but they wanted to have it done right away before tax season, so we got it done right away. But let's say you're buying something in January of 23, you don't need it until the following year.
Yeah.
So sometimes people move ahead right away, but they don't have to. You can do it later on in the fall.
So what is your preferred time that we should reach out to you? So, I mean, we're just actually now, as we're recording that, we're like in June, and some of our K1s are just coming in, obviously. So, as a GP, as an LP, you also kind of want to have a healthy cycle, and you want to have all of your paperwork lined up. So we generally tend to want to work as smoothly as possible and predictable. So what's like kind of the preferred timeline for yourself? Where should someone who is underwriting a new property involve you into that?
Sure. Well, again, it kind of depends on what time of the year is and when you want to be
Yeah.
filing your taxes. But what the way our process works is that we have a questionnaire that you fill out, which will give information about the property. And what we'll do is within 2 business days, provide you with a free preliminary analysis of a very conservative estimate of what the savings would be. And then the cost of the study, our cost of study is not percentage based, it's based on the amount of work that's required. Also, 100% of the time, we always do a site visit for every single property. We know that by being able to do that, we can not only provide the maximum amount of depreciation, but we will also defend that study at no cost in case there's ever an audit. And of the tens of thousands of studies we've done, we've never had a study overturned.
Yeah. So you're able to do that because you have a nationwide network, right? So from coast to coast, you're able to walk properties in person.
Yes, I mean we have boots on the ground throughout the country, and like I said, we will do a site visit for every single one. And I'll give an example of pretty much everything we do is domestic here. However, I did get a CPA contact me recently about one of his clients with a U.S. taxpayer who purchased a property in Paris, France, and he wanted to know whether or not we could do a cost segregation study on that one as well. Now, there's totally different rules for international properties, but we were able to provide him with analysis for that as well. For instance, there's not bonus depreciation for international properties and things of that nature.
Oh, I didn't even know that's a thing. So as a US taxpayer, if I buy international property, I can do a cost segregation on that with a US-based cost segregation company and tie that into my American tax paperwork.
Yes, yes.
Oh, wow. Well, that's very interesting. And that counts for any country in the world, or is that do they have to have a treaty? Like, for example, France and the US, or Germany and the US, they have certain kind of trade treaties, tax treaties, or is that literally for anything? Like, if I buy a property in the Philippines, that will apply equally?
I can't say that I'm an expert on that since I haven't had a lot of experience with international. What I would suggest is that if there's a unique circumstance like that, let's take a look at it, and then we'll be able to provide guidance on what it is for that particular country.
Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting. So going back to the multifamily property, bonus depreciation is phasing out. Cost segregation is obviously staying, as you already said. What are some of the items that can be deducted in the first 5 years that you think powerful tools to maybe make a dent in the business plan? For example, you mentioned earlier that parking lot takes 15 years and the parking lot is a major capex for the syndication. So it's anyway something that we don't like to touch if we don't have to. But what are some of the items that are within the 5-year period that would really make a difference on the property in terms of the appearance and the overall feeling of what the property has for the tenants?
Sure. What you're looking at, it could be appliances, it could be carpeting, electrical things of that nature. Flooring, you kind of have to look at the details because depending upon the type of flooring, some you can depreciate within a 5 year, and some actually has to be straight line depreciated. So it really just depends on what the detail is, and that's why with the individual studies that we do, we're able to very exhaustive analysis with our engineers to identify what are all the pieces and parts within the property that can be depreciated faster. Like for instance, our engineers will zoom in on a picture and look at what's the model of this security camera, so we can take a look at what's the cost basis for that. And then the other thing you mentioned previously was something about, CapEx renovations. We can do an additional analysis on not just the acquisition of the property, but also what type of renovations you're doing, so you're able to get benefits from that as well.
Yeah. Um, what's the difference between the flooring? Is it, for example, hardwood floor, and then maybe we have vinyl flooring, or if we have tiles? Which of those actually have a different time horizon on the depreciation?
Yeah, it would be more with the hardwood would be an example of that. But there are so many different variations of it, and that's why, I mean, it's not really cut and dry as far as, um, for me just to be able to make a statement on this type of flooring versus another one.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has to do with how it's secured to the floor and things of that nature. And that's what our study will identify.
So who decides what appreciates in which way, or depreciates rather? Like, is there a government agency that looks into all the different models and applies, like, okay, this will fall apart in this many years, and this how this needs to be depreciated? Like, if I think about, for example, you mentioned security cameras and models, like there's probably new camera models coming to market every year.
Yes, what we'll do is be able to identify all that componentry within it.
Huh, interesting. It's such a complex topic once. I mean, that's why there's people like yourself who are experts, and then you tie in engineers who look into all of the nuances of it, to really make sure that
Well,
the
yeah, and if I could just follow up on
maximum.
that a little,
Go ahead.
yeah, and if I could follow up on that a little bit, we're not making the decisions ourselves. This is all based on what's in the IRS tax code.
Yeah.
So what our engineers do is they take a look at what's in the tax code, and we will apply that tax code to the tax studies. We're not making up any of this stuff ourselves, and that's why we have a perfect record in regards to backing up all of our projects. We've had some clients that have been under audit, and we've successfully defended them with no problems, because it's all based on adhering to the IRS tax code.
Yeah. What are some other interesting components about cost segregation that you think syndicators and GPs that underwrite deals should know about?
Well, I'm not saying it's intentional, but I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding as far as what the benefit can be for, let's say, an LP, a limited partner, versus a general partner, or maybe even one of the investors who might be own other properties, or maybe they're a real estate professional, or has a spouse that's a real estate professional. Because kind of the gold standard is, if you're a real estate professional or have a spouse that's a real estate professional, the deductions can not only go against the gains within that property, but also go ahead and offset your W-2 income. For instance, I have a surgeon on the East Coast who's a very high net worth or high W-2 earner, but his wife is a real estate professional. So the losses that come from all of his properties can actually offset his high W-2 income as well. And I think sometimes there might be, again, not maybe intentional, but misrepresentation to some of the limited partners as far as how they can benefit. So what we always suggest is that you go and talk to your tax counsel to find out what your unique circumstances are, to make sure that you understand what benefits you can take advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a status that I hear, especially like in the conference part of things, where people are still maybe hovering between W-2, and they're trying to achieve that status of being a real estate professional to make or take advantage of additional tax advantages. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on the real estate professional. There's a real clear definition from the IRS as far as what is a real estate professional. For instance, are you working at least 750 hours a year in that? Do you have documentation to support that? You don't want to have a W-2 and claim you're a real estate professional, because that's going to be a red flag for an audit, and in all likelihood, you're not going to pass that. So it is there if you can take advantage of it legitimately.
What does successful documentation look like? Like, is it travel? Is it going to conferences? Do investor meetings, for example, like we go to restaurants all the time, meeting with investors or other GPs, syndicators. If we document those, do they count towards those hours, or what is proper paperwork to prove this to the IRS look like?
Well, you do need to have documentation. I would suggest that you do it on a daily basis. I heard of one situation where someone was audited for that, and they had it all in paper, and the whole thing was written out with one pen for the entire year. Well, the IRS looked at that and go, "You just made this up at the 11th hour." So I would suggest anybody to go to the IRS website to find out are all the requirements as far as that's concerned. I mean, what are the activities that you can legitimately do? But I think those things you mentioned are very good. As long as you're actively involved in that profession, then those could count toward that.
Yeah, and it needs to be the primary occupation. So even if I do 750 hours within real estate, if I have a different occupation where I put in 1,000 hours a year, then it doesn't count, right?
Correct. Yeah, it has to be specifically for the real estate portion of it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an interesting one. But for example, somebody who has a spouse that maybe doesn't have a primary job, 750 hours it's really just like 3 hours a day for any given day during the week.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially if you own properties, if you're materially participating in that, maybe you're helping with renters or leases or things of that nature, or maybe an underwriting process. I mean, there's a whole lot of different activities that can count toward that.
Let me give you another example. If I have multiple properties as an owner that are not necessarily, for example, multifamily properties, but they are properties, and if I start renting a single apartment in one of those, would the work that I do around that house count towards the real estate professional? Let's say, for example, I have to work with a designer, architect, landscaper, and I have to manage them. And maybe just a single unit, a single room out of that building is actually rented. Would that all still count towards a real estate professional?
Yes.
That's very interesting. So then if you start documenting it, you can take all of the tax benefits and carry it over. Okay, this is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it reminds me of another situation. Some people will present a portfolio of properties to me, and maybe they'll present their primary residence as well. And I'll say, well, we can do it on investment properties, but not your primary residence. Well, we have some people that maybe own a duplex, and they live in one and they rent out the other one. Yeah. Well, in that particular case, we can do a cost segregation on just the one unit that's for investment purposes that they rent out, but not the one for primary residence.
Yeah, got it. So if I were to rent out a single room, let's say in a brownstone in New York, then I only get to do cost seg on that one room, compared to like on a multifamily property, we get to do the cost seg on the entire property.
Well, yeah, you get into an interesting question here in regards to what's the threshold as far as what size properties does it make sense.
Yeah.
And the threshold that we use is going to be about $250,000 or greater, excluding the land value. Mm-hmm. Because you need to be able to make the numbers work, because obviously there's a cost associated with the study, and to make sure that it's beneficial. If you have something that's less than that, it may not be worthwhile. And another thing to take into consideration is, what circumstances does it not make sense to do a cost segregation study? And one of the questions on our preliminary analysis is, what's your hold period going to be? Are you going to be holding that period for that property for at least 3 to 5 years? Because there's something called a recapture tax. If you buy something and you sell it within a year or two, you're going to be subject to that. And we don't suggest. In fact, I just had a situation yesterday where someone presented me with 4 properties, and he's going to be selling them in 2024. And I said, it doesn't make sense for you to go ahead and do that because of the recapture tax.
That
So
even applies to bonus depreciation?
it'd be the same. You can still get that bonus depreciation, but again, you want to be able to hold that property for a period of time to make it worthwhile.
So, and the mark is 24
So
months?
so well, you want to be able to, after you do your cost segregation study, be able to hold that period for at least, we suggest 3 to 5 years in order to get the payback on it. So if you're gonna buy something to flip it, we don't suggest you do it.
Okay, because we've seen a lot of transactions, especially in the last 5 years, especially in the Arizona area, Phoenix, Dallas, markets that have been moving very, very quickly in terms of pricing. A lot of the volume turned around in like sometimes even as little as 18 months, 24 months. Deals were bought and sold. And I think that from what I'm gathering, a lot of those still took bonus depreciations.
Yeah, well, you have to take a look at the total picture. Typically, I would say you want to hold it for at least 3 to 5 years or longer,
Yeah.
based on what you anticipate you're going to be able to sell it for. However, we all know, especially in some areas where prices have spiked a whole lot, and sometimes the better. I've had someone do this with some hotels that he bought. He went ahead and he had the studies done, but he said someone came along and offered him stupid money for it, and everything is available for sale at the right price. So he took that into consideration. He was still better off selling them and paying that recapture tax because of the profit he was going to make on it. However, we want people to be cognizant of that recapture tax and put that into their equation when they're buying, whether or not they do that.
So, but how does the IRS execute on that? Like, how does that get triggered? Let's say I'm an LP and my GP returned money to me within 24 months of acquisition. How does that recapture tax get triggered? And how does that play out for the GP and the LPs?
That's probably a question better suited for the CPA as far as
Okay.
how that's going to be treated.
Okay. Yeah, because I think this would be a risk that many LPs are not aware of, and I would guess even GPs are not.
I agree, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, but frequently what happens is the devil's in the details, and you really need to understand what all the unique circumstances are. And for me to put out there a blanket statement and say this is the way it is, there's so many different nuances that are out there and
Yeah.
specifics that it's hard to cover what every single scenario.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And like everything, it's nuanced. You know, it's as you said with the flooring earlier, it's nuanced. Deals are nuanced. That's the nature of it, and that's I think why people really need to know what they're doing. And if they don't know what they're doing, they need to work with experts like yourself.
Yeah, and I just thought of another situation that sometimes comes up. And for instance, I did 4 properties recently in Hawaii, which were Airbnb type properties, and they were condos. And what's interesting there is that depending upon the condo association, um, they may not own any of the land. So what did I say earlier? For cost
Yeah.
segregation, you take a look at the purchase price, you subtract the land. In those particular situations, you could actually take a look at the entire acquisition cost and depreciate that because there was no land allocation.
Yeah.
And I had that situation occur sometimes with like land leases. Let's say it might be a Walgreens store or some
Yeah.
other retail
Triple
thing
net
where they're
lease.
actually buying just the lease, but not the land itself. In that particular case, 100% can go against the depreciation without subtracting the land.
Yeah, very, very nuanced. There's also one case that I've seen last year, and I'm not certain this might actually be more like a CPA thing again, but where I saw a private equity firm going into the deal to some degree, and they weren't interested in the bonus depreciation in their allocation. So the way it was at least advertised on that investment is that more of the overall cost segregation and bonus depreciation benefits are bestowed on the other LPs that are not part of that particular part of the capital stack, which made it over 100% over their investment.
I've heard that there can be different ways to do the allocation. That's really outside the realm of what we do. We do the studies, we provide the information, and then what the CPAs or the GPs do in regards to the distribution, that's something we don't get involved with.
Yeah, obviously, but I thought that was really interesting because it's such a nuanced thing, but it can be a powerful tool to know. So I just wanted to throw it out there and see if you've heard about it too, because it's something that we only very rarely saw on different investment opportunities. And in that particular one, it was very significant because there was a lot of private equity money in the capital stack, which allowed the other LPs to have a different level of benefit in the overall depreciation.
Yeah, there's so many different variables.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's so interesting. Once you get into the nuances, once you learn the ropes, once you speak with experts like yourself, once you build yourself a successful team, that includes somebody who is a professional cost segregation and lawyers and other professionals around yourself who are really focused on multifamily syndications, then you can get into all of those nuances and really dial in. And I think especially where we are in the market cycle right now, this is more important than ever before, because I keep referring to the golden decade of multifamily, the last 10 years in terms of where interest rates were and how prices moved and how immigration patterns were. It was a market where I think many people could make money. But now we're in a market where only the really good, well-connected, dialed-in operators will succeed.
Yeah, and one situation or several situations I see right now is when people are having a hard time penciling out a deal. Sometimes we're looking at alternative methods, which might be seller financing, and maybe even have the seller still stay in the deal to some degree, and sometimes being able to maybe have assume a loan as well, loan assumption, and that's some other alternatives as well. So people are being creative as far as what the different options are in this new environment. I know it's going to be a challenge for some of these people, especially those that had some bridge loans that are out there that will be coming due, and that's has been a challenge for some, and will probably continue to go that direction, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think data is pointing to more pain in the markets. There will be more pain, which is, again, it's the opportunity for others. Whoever is positioned well, has experts at hand, has cash at hand, there's more opportunity coming.
Yeah. Another thing I'd just like to mention real briefly, we talked about the size projects and things of that nature. We also do it not just for multifamily, all property types, but also single family homes or long-term or short-term rentals. And again, the criteria for that would be $250,000 or greater, excluding the land value, to be able to make it make sense.
So basically anything in New York.
Yeah, pretty much.
I don't think there's anything you can touch here for less than $250,000.
Yeah, but I've had some which are in some rural tertiary markets where that may not be the case. But you're right.
Yeah.
In the boroughs there, Manhattan or Southern California, actually most areas of the country, that's not an issue.
Yeah. So, Mark, where can people connect with you, find you, or get their cost segregation studies done? Sure.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I have over 10,000 contacts there. And also, they want to send me an email. I'm at Mark Gross at costsegregationservices.com. And I'd be happy to provide anybody with a free preliminary analysis for any property type nationwide.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you giving us more insights on cost segregation. And we definitely learned a couple of different aspects. Like, for example, I had no idea that we can do cost segregation internationally. So that's very, very helpful. And thank you so much for your wisdom.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.